He blessed Israel 3 times. Each time he opened his mouth to curse, blessing came out instead. He even prophesied a star rising from Jacob, words that scholars would later connect to the Messiah. Then he switched sides. He gave advice that led to the deaths of 24,000 Israelites. And when Israel went to war against Midian, they found him standing with the enemy. He died by the sword, the same sword an angel had threatened him with years earlier on a road where his donkey saw more clearly than he did. His name was Balaam, and his story answers a question most people don't want to ask. Can you hear God's voice and still love money more than him? Balaam was not an Israelite. He lived far from the tents of Jacob, in Pethor, near the Euphrates River. But he knew the God of Israel, or at least he knew how to hear him. That was his trade. Balaam was a prophet for hire, a man whose words carried weight in the courts of kings. The reputation had spread across nations. Whoever Balaam blessed rose to power. Whoever he cursed fell to ruin. When kings had enemies they couldn't defeat with swords, they sent for Balaam. He operated in the space between religions, fluent in the language of the divine, but loyal to no single altar. He could invoke Yahweh when it suited him, consult omens when it paid better, and negotiate terms with whoever was writing the check. Balaam had a gift, the ability to hear God's voice, and he had turned that gift into a business. The question was never whether God would speak. The question was what Balaam would do with what he heard. Balak stood on the walls of his palace and looked out at the valley below. What he saw made his stomach turn. Tents, thousands of them, stretching across the plains like a flood that had not yet reached his gates. Israel had come. They had crushed the Amorites, toppled King Sihon, destroyed Og of Bashan. Nations that Moab had feared for generations had crumbled in weeks. And now this people, this unstoppable horde, was camped at his border, close enough that he could see the smoke rising from their cooking fires. Balak was not a fool. He had seen what happened to kings who met Israel in battle. Their armies had melted, their cities had burned, their gods had proven useless. Moab's warriors were strong, but strength meant nothing against a people whose God had split the sea and drowned Pharaoh's chariots. If Balak fought, he would lose. If he negotiated, he would be absorbed. There was only one option left: find a way to turn Israel's God against them. Find a man who could speak to that God. Find Balaam. The messengers arrived at Balaam's door after dark. They were not ordinary men, elders of Moab and Midian, officials who spoke for kings. They carried silver, gold, and gifts fit for royalty. Their message was simple. King Balak requests your services. A people has come out of Egypt and covered the face of the land. Come and curse them for us. Perhaps then we can defeat them and drive them away. The payment, they assured him, would match the task. Balaam didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He said what a man says when he wants to appear spiritual while keeping his options open. Stay here tonight. I will bring you back the answer the Lord gives me. It sounded pious. It sounded like a man who wouldn't move without God's permission. But the gold was already in his house, already glinting in the torchlight, already whispering possibilities. Balaam went to inquire of God. The question was whether he went hoping for permission or hoping to obey. That night, God spoke. The answer was clear, direct, and left no room for interpretation. Do not go with them. You must not curse these people, because they are blessed. 3 commands in one sentence. Don't go. Don't curse. They are blessed. A prophet who genuinely wanted to obey would have had everything he needed. The case was closed. The decision was made. All Balaam had to do was send the messengers home and return the gold. The next morning, Balaam stood before the officials and delivered God's verdict. Go back to your own country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. The messengers mounted their horses and rode back to Moab empty-handed. Balaam watched them disappear down the road, the dust settling behind them. He had obeyed, He had said no, but something in the way he said it, "The Lord has refused to let me go," suggested that the refusal belonged to God, not to him. Balaam had delivered the right answer, but his heart was still calculating. Balak did not accept defeat. He sent a second delegation, more officials, higher ranks, richer gifts. The message this time was not a request, but a summons. "Do not let anything keep you from coming to me. I will reward you handsomely. I will do whatever you say. Just come and curse this people for me." The offer had grown. The pressure had increased. And the gold had multiplied. Balaam's response sounded righteous. "Even if Balak gave me his palace filled with silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God." The words were perfect. The theology was sound. But then came the sentence that revealed everything. "Now stay here tonight, as the others did, and I will find out what else the Lord will tell me." God had already spoken. The answer had been clear, but Balaam wanted to ask again, because maybe, this time, God would say something different. Maybe the price was finally high enough to change heaven's mind. That night, God spoke again. "Since these men have come to summon you, go with them, but do only what I tell you." Balaam heard what he wanted to hear. He saddled his donkey before dawn and set out for Moab with the officials. The gold was waiting. The king was waiting. And God had said yes, or so Balaam believed. But the text adds a detail that Balaam missed. God was very angry when he went. The permission was not approval. It was release. The kind of release a father gives when a stubborn child insists on learning the hard way. God let Balaam go, not because the journey was right, but because Balaam's heart had already chosen. Sometimes God says yes to expose what's inside us. Sometimes the open door is the beginning of the fall. Balaam rode toward Moab, thinking he had negotiated successfully with heaven. He didn't realize he was walking into a test he had already failed. The road to Moab stretched ahead, dusty and unremarkable. Balaam rode his donkey, flanked by 2 servants, his mind probably rehearsing what he would say to King Balak. He didn't notice that the landscape had changed. He didn't see the figure standing in the middle of the road, a warrior with a drawn sword, blazing with a presence that didn't belong to this world. The angel of the Lord had positioned himself to oppose the prophet. And Balaam, the man who made his living by seeing what others couldn't, saw nothing. The donkey saw. The animal veered off the road and into a field, eyes wide with terror at the divine warrior blocking their path. Balaam, annoyed by the sudden detour, struck the donkey and forced her back onto the road. He assumed the animal was being stubborn. He didn't consider that the donkey might be seeing something he couldn't. The prophet who heard God's voice had become blind to God's messenger, standing 3 feet in front of him. The angel moved. This time he stood in a narrow path between 2 vineyards, walls of stone on either side. The donkey saw him again and pressed against the wall, crushing Balaam's foot in the process. Balaam cursed and beat her harder. The animal was ruining his journey, embarrassing him in front of the Moabite officials. He didn't ask why a donkey that had carried him faithfully for years was suddenly acting this way. He just wanted her to obey. The 3rd time, the angel stood where there was no room to turn, no field, no wall, just a path too narrow to pass. The donkey did the only thing she could. She lay down under Balaam, refusing to move another step toward the sword only she could see. Balaam's rage exploded. He beat her with his staff, blow after blow, demanding she rise, demanding she move, demanding she stop making a fool of him. The irony was complete. A prophet famous for his spiritual sight was beating an animal for having more discernment than he did. Then God opened the donkey's mouth. "What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times?" The words came from the animal's lips, clear, coherent, impossible. A donkey was speaking, and Balaam, the prophet of the supernatural, didn't flinch. He answered as if arguing with livestock were a normal occurrence. "You have made a fool of me. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." The donkey responded with a question that should have shattered him. "Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" Balaam answered quietly, "No, the animal had more sense than the man. The beast was asking better questions than the prophet." Balaam had spent his life claiming to hear God's voice, and now a donkey was exposing his blindness while he stood there holding the stick he had used to beat her. The humiliation was just beginning. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes. The angel stood before him, sword drawn, face terrible, radiating a holiness that made the ground itself seem to tremble. Balaam fell on his face, his staff clattering to the dirt, his pride collapsing in a single breath. The being spoke. "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you, because your path is a reckless one before me." The donkey saw me and turned away. If she had not, I would have killed you by now, but I would have spared her. The words landed like stones. The prophet would have died. The donkey would have lived. Balaam had been saved by the animal he had beaten. Saved from a sword he couldn't see, by obedience he didn't recognize. He stammered his confession. "I have sinned. I did not realize you were standing in the road to oppose me. If you are displeased, I will go back." But the angel's instruction was not retreat. "Go with the men, but speak only what I tell you." The door was still open. The test was still in progress. And Balaam still had a choice to make. Balaam arrived in Moab, and Balak received him with barely concealed impatience. "Did I not send you an urgent summons? Why didn't you come immediately? Am I really not able to reward you?" Balaam's answer was careful. "I have come to you now, but I can only speak what God puts in my mouth." Balak didn't care about theology. He wanted results. He led Balaam to Bamoth Baal, a high place where they could look down on the Israelite camp sprawling across the valley below. 7 altars, 7 bulls, 7 rams. The sacrifices burned while Balak waited for the curse that would save his kingdom. Balaam went aside to meet with God, and when he returned, he opened his mouth. But instead of a curse, a blessing poured out. "How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce those whom the Lord has not denounced?" Balak's face twisted. This was not what he paid for. Balaam had spoken, but the words belonged to someone else. The prophet's mouth had become a weapon against the man who hired him. Balak tried again. Maybe the location was wrong. Maybe a different view of the camp would produce a different prophecy. He led Balaam to Pisgah, to the top of a mountain where they could see only part of Israel. Perhaps a curse on a portion would work where a curse on the whole had failed. 7 more altars. 7 more bulls. 7 more rams. The smoke rose into the sky while the king held his breath. Balaam returned from his encounter with God and spoke again. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot change it. Balak's hands clenched into fists. He had paid for a curse. He was receiving a theological lecture on divine faithfulness. The prophet he had hired was systematically destroying his hope with every word. But Balak was not ready to quit. There was still one more high place to try. Peor, the last attempt. Balak was desperate now, grasping at any possibility. 7 altars, 7 bulls, 7 rams, the same ritual, the same hope that maybe this time God could be persuaded. But something changed in Balaam. This time he did not go looking for omens. He turned his face toward the wilderness, toward the tents of Israel, and the Spirit of God came upon him. The blessing that flowed was the strongest yet. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. Like valleys they spread out, like gardens beside a river. Water will flow from their buckets. Their seed will have abundant water. Balak couldn't take it anymore. He struck his hands together in fury. I summoned you to curse my enemies, but you have blessed them 3 times. Leave. I said I would reward you handsomely, but the Lord has kept you from being rewarded. The irony was lost on him. Balak thought the Lord had deprived Balaam of gold. He didn't realize the Lord had been trying to deprive Balaam of something far more costly, his own destruction. Before Balaam left, he spoke one more time. This was not a blessing for Israel, or a word for Balak. This was something else. A prophecy that reached beyond the moment, beyond the desert, beyond centuries not yet born. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. The words hung in the air, heavy with a meaning no one present could fully grasp. A star, a scepter, a king coming from this people that Balaam had been hired to curse. The prophecy pointed forward to David, who would rise from Israel's tribes. And beyond David, to someone greater, a descendant who would rule not just a nation, but a kingdom without end. Balaam had come to Moab for gold. He left having announced the Messiah. The prophet whose heart loved money had become, for one moment, a mouthpiece for eternity. But the moment would not last. The darkness in Balaam was not finished yet. Balaam rode away from Moab without his payment. Balak had dismissed him in disgust. The mission was a failure, or so it seemed. But somewhere between the 3rd blessing and the journey home, Balaam did something the text doesn't reveal until later. He gave Balak advice, not publicly, not in front of the altars or the officials, quietly. A suggestion whispered to a desperate king who was willing to try anything. The advice was simple. If you cannot curse Israel, make them curse themselves. Their God has rules. Their covenant has conditions. Send your women into their camp. Invite them to your feasts, your sacrifices, your beds. Let them eat meat offered to idols. Let them worship Baal alongside your daughters. Their own God will turn against them, and you won't need a prophet to do what their sin will accomplish. Balaam couldn't speak a curse, so he engineered one. The mouth that had blessed Israel 3 times now plotted their destruction in private. The plan worked. Moabite women appeared at the edges of the Israelite camp. Beautiful, inviting, carrying platters of food sacrificed to Baal. The invitations seemed harmless at first. A meal, a festival, a smile. But the meals led to altars, and the altars led to beds, and the beds led to worship. Israelite men began bowing before Baal of Peor, joining themselves to foreign gods in a ritual that mixed sex and idolatry into a single act of betrayal. God's anger burned. A plague swept through the camp, minus 24,000 dead before it was stopped. The curse Balaam couldn't speak had arrived anyway, delivered not by his mouth, but by his strategy. Israel did what no enemy had accomplished. They brought judgment on themselves. Balaam had lost his payment from Balak, but he had still found a way to serve the king's purpose. He couldn't bend God's words, so he bent God's people instead. The story could have ended differently. Balaam could have gone home after the blessings, content with having obeyed God's voice, even when it cost him gold. He could have become an example of a man who chose rightly when it mattered. Instead, he became something else. When Israel later went to war against Midian, the army found Balaam among the enemy. The man who had blessed Israel was standing on the other side of the battlefield. The text records his death in a single verse, almost as an afterthought. They also killed Balaam son of Beor with the sword. No dramatic confrontation, no final speech, just a name on a list of the fallen. The prophet who had seen the angel, heard God's voice, and spoken blessings over Israel died fighting against them. The sword the angel had threatened on the road finally found him. He had spent his life navigating between God and gold. In the end, he discovered you cannot serve both. Balaam's death was not his legacy. His name lived on, but not as an example to follow. Peter wrote about The way of Balaam, who loved the wages of wickedness. Jude wrote about Balaam's error, the mistake of those who rush for profit. The book of Revelation mentions the teaching of Balaam, the doctrine that led God's people into immorality and idolatry. 3 New Testament writers, 3 warnings, all pointing back to the same man. The prophet who heard God had become a cautionary tale. Not because he spoke lies, his prophecies were true. Not because he lacked spiritual gifts, he saw visions others couldn't see. Balaam's failure was simpler and more common. He loved money more than he loved the voice that spoke to him. He had the gift, but not the character. He had the access, but not the loyalty. And in the end, the gift couldn't save him from the corruption that lived alongside it. Balaam proved that you can hear God clearly and still walk away from him. 1 gold coin at a time. Balaam heard God's voice. That was never the problem. He saw angels, spoke prophecies, blessed when he was paid to curse. His mouth worked perfectly. His heart was the issue. He wanted both, the voice of God and the gold of kings. He thought he could hold them in the same hands. He couldn't. The donkey saw more clearly than the prophet. The angel's sword hung over his path while he beat the only creature trying to save him. And in the end, the man who blessed Israel 3 times died fighting against them. Can you love God and gold at the same time? Balaam tried. It cost him everything. Subscribe. Some warnings come with a name attached.